Welcome back for the series of training modules designed to help you, the channel sales partner, understand Surface Hub and how you position it and sell it with your customers. In Module 2, we're going to look a little bit of detail around the hardware and walk you through some of the capabilities that Surface Hub offers from a hardware perspective. So let's get straight into it. Surface Hub comes in two sizes. There is the 55-inch Surface Hub, there is the 84-inch Surface Hub. Aesthetically, both devices look identical. The only physical difference, or in fact the services and the capability that the devices offer, is exactly the same. So whether a customer walks into a space or a room to use a 55-inch Surface Hub, it is identical to the experience they get with the 84-inch Surface Hub. There are some slight differences under the hood, and we'll just take a quick brief look at those. Weight is an important one, and especially when we talk about the 84-inch. So the 55-inch comes in around 42 kgs. Okay, so it's a 1080p 100-point touch display, and it runs a 4th gen Intel i5 processor. The network that this device can connect to, so all of the usual networks that you would expect from your personal connected compute device. So there's Wi-Fi 802.11. There is wired Ethernet, which again, when you're setting up Surface Hub, is the recommended method to ensure the customer gets the best possible experience when using this on their infrastructure. There is Bluetooth, there is NFC, there is Miracast. There is a whole bunch of capability that we'll step through in further modules and demonstrate some of this to you. There are 2 cameras on either side of the device, which we'll talk about a little bit further, placed strategically to really gain the best possible experience with people who aren't in the room at the same time. So you're connecting these people in remotely. Surface Hub ships with a couple of pens. These are active radio-specific pens that we use for whiteboarding and inking and annotating on the device. Really changes the experience, even when bringing slides or PowerPoints up. Rather than being this unidirectional way to present things, I can now annotate and mark up and go into a lot more detail so the audience becomes far more engaged with how their presentation is being delivered. Now, on the bottom of the Surface Hub, if you were to look up right underneath under here, you'll see the ports that are available on there. Then again, very familiar from a PC perspective. If people want to plug in external devices to bring content on the device, we support that. There's DisplayPort, there is an HDMI port. But really, one of the challenges we found around this type of technology is doing that dongle dance. When you bring your device in and you want to plug in and bring some content to the display, often there's a challenge: who has the right dongle? How do I connect it in? I don't have the right adapter to do that stuff. So we've enabled Miracast off the bat with this device to allow you seamlessly and easily to bring in wireless content directly on to Surface Hub. There may be occasion in a large auditorium, is one example, where you need to mirror whatever is on the Surface Hub onto a larger display. So we have a DisplayPort out, which allows you to take this and it mirrors the entire content. It doesn't extend this display up onto a larger display, in such as an auditorium. All of the other ports, as you would expect, such as wired Ethernet port, is 1 gig on there. And there are a couple of other ports which allow us to run external compute outside of the Surface Hub compute hardware we're running on here, if you need to run particular applications on a device as well. The 84-inch, as I mentioned, aesthetically is identical. The primary difference, well, there's a couple of primary differences. One is the weight, 280 pounds, which in kgs is 127 kgs. So, most of this taken up by the glass display in terms of the weight. That's important to consider, especially when you're thinking about how you deploy these Surface Hubs into your customers. It requires 4 people to lift this device and actually transport it around and get it into position around there. Okay, so, I'd say it's labor intensive, but you need to consider how you plan very, very carefully when this hub turns up in the loading dock to how you get it into position and install it in the right position for the customer. We have a slightly high power onboard compute and graphics card around our GPU, and that enables us to run a 4K 100-point touch display compared to the 55-inch where we're running a 1080p 100-point touch display. The other networking capability, the cameras, the AV that are built into the 84-inch Surface Hub are identical from there. Obviously, it's built for a slightly larger room. More than the huddle room is around the 55-inch. The 84-inch we're seeing going into larger spaces, and really when it leans itself to having groups of people collaborating seamlessly at the same time. And whilst the Surface Hub ships with 2 pens, this leans itself to actually having 3 people concurrently inking and working on the device at the same time. So the Surface Hub 84-inch, the ports that are on the bottom, very, very similar. There are some additional USB ports on here. Again, we have the same capability about being able to bring in wired connections, using HDMI, using DisplayPort, using VGA across there. We can take DisplayPort out, again, just to mirror the Surface Hub, and we have the external PC connectivity on the backplane there as well. When thinking about the Surface Hub in your customer's environment, how is it going to be mounted? It's a simple thing, but it's something you have to consider. There are 3 types of Microsoft first-party stands that are available today that you can use to leverage the appropriate mount inside the customer. There is a wall mount. Very simply, allow you to, using sort of VESA mounting points, to mount this on the customer's wall for the 55-inch and for the 84-inch. There are mounts available for both sizes. For where a customer doesn't have an engineered wall, especially in the case of the 84-inch or even with a 55-inch, where you actually want to mount this device onto the wall, but it may be just a partition. We've introduced a floor-supported wall mount, which allows me to mount the device on the wall, but vertically bear all the weight down to the floor, so I don't need to think about re-engineering the wall structure just so I can mount this device on there. And then we have the rolling stand. Quite often what we see with Surface Hub is it lends itself to being in a space, and quite often it's moved around inside the organization. So users can take advantage of it when they're doing one particular type of work, then move it to another part or another department so they can take advantage and leverage it. There is a rolling stand available from Microsoft that allows you to do that easily. Again, aesthetically, this is exactly the same on the 55-inch as the 84-inch on there, the only difference being size and weight. Ethernet and Wi-Fi, I mentioned that it's enabled on there, and yes, once we have all the Wi-Fi on board, there is an Ethernet port, a 1 gig Ethernet port, and it is highly recommended that when you connect Surface Hub to the customer's network, you do this via an Ethernet. This is really to maximize and ensure that when a customer is deploying quality of service across their infrastructure to support Skype for Business, for the likes of audio and video, we maximize the experience that we deliver down to this endpoint as well. On the side, we have a USB port. Again, this is another method we can use to inject content. We'll step through and say the many ways you can bring content onto the Surface Hub. There is a USB 3 port on the side, but what's super important and really important here to understand with customers is, and we'll talk a little bit about the operating system in a further module, is that I cannot inject or introduce any executable files into Surface Hub. It is a super secure device. I can't then launch or inject a virus onto there. I can't run an executable file as a user. That is controlled via administration, and an executable file will not run on Surface Hub. So whilst this may be in a communal space, and by design, Surface Hub is there so anybody can walk up and use it, what it means is super secure from a security perspective. The IT department in the organization have no concerns around running Surface Hub. There are some user controls on the side. Used pretty seldom, to be honest. There are just volume controls and there are brightness controls, as well as a source input control if you do want to use one of the other inputs to switch to some other sort of video source into Surface Hub. But the concept and the idea behind Surface Hub is it is a walk up and use device. Okay? I don't need to think about how I switch it on. I don't need to think about how I use it. It's very intuitive, based around Windows 10, and the device just becomes ready as soon as you approach that. There are 2 cameras on Surface Hub, one placed on either side of the device, and these are placed at eye height, which is a little bit different. Traditionally with video conferencing, you'll see the camera either mounted very high in the room or into the corner of the room, and what we've learned is that if you are a remote participant in a meeting, so let's take the scenario, we have a group of people in a room sat around the Surface Hub, and we have people who are remotely working, connected in to this meeting experience. If you don't maintain good visual contact and allow that person who's remote to see not only maybe myself who is presenting at the screen, but also the other people who may be in the room, not only see them, but hear them well is a critical part of it, the engagement during that meeting becomes super hard, right? We've all felt that experience where you feel very, very disconnected from the meeting that's taking place, and it really is not conducive to collaborating effectively. So we've taken that into account with Surface Hub. The cameras are placed deliberately at eye height for the 97th percentile on there. So even while I'm stood at the screen, the super wide angle, these are 105-degree field of vision, the person who is remote can see me presenting at Surface Hub and can also get a good field view of the room so they can see everybody who is in there as well. The placement there being at eye height But what also we've done is introduced a virtual director to seamlessly switch based on where the presenter is standing or where we're looking for a face view. So when I'm stood to this side of the screen, we don't want to use the camera onto this side because we're going to get that ear cam experience. So intelligently, Surface Hub will ultimately switch and use the appropriate camera so it gets a face-on view and the fullest view of the room across there. The speakers. The speakers are optimized for voice, again, to maximize the experience of people who are connecting remotely for the benefit of people who are in the room. Perhaps if I'm playing content back through there, around video, we really tune these around voice so I get the best connected experience from both ends of the Surface Hub. All the hardware in here, you may have seen there, we talk around up to about 8 meters. So it's important to understand the size of room that Surface Hub fits into. The cameras, the speakers, the mic array, which we'll touch on in a moment, are all designed to optimize up to about 8 meters in length. So you might say, well, what happens when a customer wants to put this in a larger space or a larger room? How do we do that? Using some of those USB ports, we can very, very easily expand or reinforce the audio and the video on Surface Hub to enhance that experience. Whether you want to put in boundary microphones, whether you want to put a side of room camera or a camera that does PTZ so you can really zoom and capture the person who is within the room as well. The mic array is based around our Kinect experience. If you're familiar with Xbox, we have this directional 4-port mic array which really homes in and picks up voice exceptionally well. So even if I'm sat at the back of the room talking in normal conversational voice, you can be sure that Surface Hub is going to pick me up. So again, when I'm remote, I'm not only hearing half of the conversation from the people at the front of the room, I'm hearing everybody right the way through the depth as well. Super important to keep remote participants engaged. I mentioned that Surface Hub comes with 2 pens. One important note, when you're ordering Surface Hub for your customers, make sure you always buy a spare couple of pens. I can guarantee you, and it doesn't matter where these are, we see this all the time, by accident, the pen goes in, it walks away, and it's never to be seen again on the Surface Hub. So, there's nothing more frustrating than walking up and you don't find a pen there to actually use. So make sure you order in a couple of these as spares, or make sure the customer has a number of them for all of their hubs that they have in. These pens are active radio pens. What I mean by that, they have their unique GUID, and they're intelligent. So we could have 2 people with 2 pens inking on Surface Hub. It can recognize different colors on different people and different pens that are using. It means I can flip the pen over, there's an eraser on the back there, and I can erase in there, and we can do all of this concurrently. I don't need to pair them, I don't need to do anything to tune these to Hub, they just automatically work. And when I put the pen back on the charging dock, it's there and it's charged and it's ready for the next person to use. Surface Hub ships with a physical keyboard as well. A lot of the time, a lot of occasions, the on-screen keyboard will pop up as appropriate in context that I use. There may be occasions, perhaps if we are sitting down and we're not touching or working with Surface Hub close up, I can drive this from a keyboard with all of the functionality that I would expect with all of my shortcut keys that are designed and specific to Surface Hub as well. So that's a quick tour of the Surface Hub hardware. Again, additional resources are available on the Surface Hub website. Make sure you join us for the next module when we look a bit further into Surface Hub.